Nestled deep in the heart of the enchanted forest, there stood a house cleverly built around the sturdy trunk of an ancient oak tree. In that house lived three extraordinary individuals: a frog, a fox, and an owl. The frog was a very jumpy fellow. You could find him most often in the sink or the bath, his laughter splashing around the house, along with his puddles. The fox was a mischievous, cheeky young woman who delighted in weaving playful tricks on the others. And then there was the owl. On days clouded by his mood, he would fly up to the top of the oak tree and sit there for hours, sulking. One day, as the owl sat at the top of the tree sulking, he felt an ominous shadow creep over the forest. The air grew thick with a sense of foreboding. It suddenly felt very dangerous in the forest. Distant thunder rumbled in the distance, and cracks of lightning burst through the air. Squeals of mice and terrified cries of rabbits and squirrels that almost fell from the branches of the trees. The owl flitted back down into the house to tell the others. He popped back into human form and burst out excitedly. "Come and look! It's terrible!" The naughty fox and the jumpy frog also popped back into human form. "We must do something. We must find out what happened," they said. Indeed, the three animals were the guardians of the forest, duty-bound to serve and protect the peace of the glorious natural woodland in which they lived. The owl said, "I will go. I can fly much faster than you can run. I will find out what is wrong in the forest and come back to tell you." The others agreed quickly. It was a very good plan, they thought. So the grumpy old owl popped back into his animal form and flew up into the treetops. He flew and he flew, with thunder rumbling around him and lightning fizzing through the air. Dark clouds filled the sky and rain started to fall. The owl saw a shiny object twinkling through the heavy rain. Intrigued, he swooped down to get a closer look. But when he got close, it mysteriously vanished. Puzzled, he flew back up and continued searching. Once more, he saw the glistening object. He dove down to see what it was, and once more, it disappeared. Realizing that it was getting very late, he knew he must return home. He flew swiftly through the rainy night, finally reaching the safety of their house. The frog and the fox were still awake, clearly very worried about him. "What did you see? Where have you been? Did you see anything?" they asked hurriedly. Catching his breath, the owl replied, "I'm not sure. I flew around a lot. I did see something shiny twice, but it kept disappearing before I could find out what it was." As the night grew deeper, they all shared a warm cup of cocoa. The comforting drink relaxed them, and soon, feeling tired from their eventful day, they all collapsed into bed exhausted. In the morning, the fox was the first to jump out of bed. She hadn't slept well anyway. The storm's howling winds had kept her tossing and turning all night. When she shook the frog awake, he jumped in alarm and banged his head on the ceiling. And when she shook the owl awake, he flapped his arms at her and grumpily complained, "It's too early, and I barely slept a wink. Leave me alone." The naughty fox would not relent, and the owl would only get up when she brought him a nice cup of tea. "Come on, we must go and find out what's wrong. I think we should go looking for that shiny thing again. It seems important somehow," she said. After eating a quick breakfast as humans, they ventured into the disturbing gloom of the eerie forest. The owl, recognizing that they would need his keen vision, took up his animal form. Each change took its toll, but for now at least he was easily able to do it. They set out with a few small supplies and some food for the journey, not expecting to be gone for very long. At lunchtime, they stopped under the grand old chestnut tree. They asked the squirrels to throw down some chestnuts, made a fire, and roasted a tasty lunch indeed. Off in the distance they heard a new sound, the sound of grunting and slashing. A man appeared suddenly with a stern, angry face. The frog jumped out of his skin, and the fox pinned her ears back, ready to pounce. When the man saw the owl, he pointed at him and said, "You! It was you! You were chasing me! I remember you!" The owl looked at the man and caught a glimpse of a very shiny, beautiful, and sharp sword. "So it was you!" he exclaimed, recognizing the blade. "I wasn't chasing you." "Yes, you were," replied the man. "You've misunderstood completely. It is our job to protect the forest. We're the guardians." "Oh, well, I've been looking for you. You're just the people I needed to see." The guardians looked at each other. exchanged glances, and just for a moment sat speechless until the fox said, "Well, what? Where? Why? How? Who are you?" she finally asked. "And what is your business?" "They call me the Hunter. That's all you need to know for now." "You must come with me, and we need to leave quickly." The man poured water on the fire, which they had managed to make in a break from the rain, and the owl grumbled, but only for a second, until he realized the serious tone of the man's voice. They started on the path and into the murky depths of the forest. The hunter was leading the way, occasionally taking his sword out to clear the undergrowth as it crept over the path. They were making their way through ancient, long-forgotten ways of the forest. The owl, older than the others, remembered these ways and grew increasingly concerned, but kept it to himself for now. The fox, trotting steadily behind the man, thought she saw something strange and shouted, "Stop! Nobody move a muscle! Not a single step!" The owl and the frog were used to the fox and her mischievous ways, but this sounded different. They knew that this was no joke. She whispered to them, "It's a trap! Nobody move! I'll go and look." As she padded away slowly up the path, she realized it was a trap. Somebody had dug a pit and covered it over with branches and leaves. If they had stepped on those branches, they would have fallen in. That might not be too bad, except the pit was full of snakes, vicious vipers with hissing tongues. The fox came back to the others and asked the man for help, cutting away around the path, and this took quite some time. Eventually, they got around the trap and back onto the path. The fox suggested, "Maybe I should go at the front, so we can see any more traps." The others quickly agreed. This sounded like a good plan indeed. After several more hours of steady walking and very little rest, they came to what seemed like a stream, but felt and looked very dangerous. They all turned to look at the frog. The water was his special talent. He sat down on a rock to think for a while. Something seemed wrong, unusual about this stream. It was not like any stream he'd ever seen. He was fond of paddling around in the streams of the forest, but he felt very uneasy about this one. After a great deal of head-scratching, he thought he would try to build a bridge. With everybody's help, they managed to build a rickety-looking bridge. They weren't sure of it, but the man insisted. "We must push on." So, cautiously, they did, with the frog now leading the way. They tentatively tiptoed out onto the bridge. With a couple of scary moments and missteps, they finally made it safely to the other side. It was there that they began to see off in the distance a castle in the fog. "That's strange," thought the owl. "I've never even heard a whisper of a castle in the forest." "There it is. We've arrived," said the hunter. But the others did not feel like they had arrived. They felt like they were in the wrong place entirely. "There must be a mistake. This place seems very evil indeed," said the frog. "You can't possibly expect us to go up to that castle." "We must," replied the hunter. "It's the only way." The fox and the owl looked at each other, and they both knew he was right. They were much braver than the frog. They started to make their way towards the castle, their hearts beating out of their chests. The hunter bravely took the lead, with his hand lightly on his mighty sword. They walked slowly on the rock-strewn path, across a crumbly, old, dilapidated bridge, leading up to the massive wooden doors at the entrance of the castle. The hunter put his hand on the door and slowly pushed, and it gave way with a creaky sound. Peering through cobwebs and with an ever-deepening feeling of dread in his heart, he walked through into the courtyard.
"Bah! You must leave!"
A voice cried out.
"I've been waiting for you. It won't work. You'll never find him here. Follow me. Bah!"
They were all very surprised by the sudden appearance of the billy goat with his proud horns and his long, ragged beard. It took a second, but the owl finally remembered. "It's you, old goat! Old owl, it's you!" They were old friends, but they hadn't seen each other for a very long time. The goat walked at the head of the group, clambering over rocks and stones that had fallen from the wall, and which now lay strewn in piles. It was very treacherous going, but despite a few tumbles and bumps, they came to a place where they could rest. "We must climb," said the goat.
"We must climb,"
said the goat. They all looked at each other with tremendous disbelief in their eyes. No way we can climb that wall, apart from the owl, of course, the frog said. I'm a very good jumper, but I can't jump that high. And the fox just looked scared.
Don't worry, just follow me. I know exactly where to go, said the goat.
They had no choice but to listen to him as rocks began to fall behind them, blocking the way back. With a great deal of care, step by step, hand by hand, they followed the goat up the wall. They eventually made their way to the top of the wall. It was very windy, blowing a gale at the summit. With their hair whipping around their faces and voices carried away by the wind, they couldn't hear each other at all. The goat beckoned them on, continuing as they began to step over the summit of the wall and descend a curving stone staircase down into the dark, misty gloom. The foreboding only grew stronger. They came to another enormous wooden door with a round metal knocker and a rusty old keyhole. A door made of thick oak planks, splintered and broken, and covered in moss and rotting through. The man stepped forward again and said, "Stay behind me. I'll go first," and he pushed gently on the creaky old door. They stepped into a green-lit room, and in the centre of the room sat a gleaming, green orb of light with wisps of smoke, and crackles of purple, and orange tongues of flame, and a snarling, vicious, evil sound. A figure appeared before them, rising up, unveiling himself from his tattered old cloak. He snarled at them in a menacing, unhuman voice as he advanced on them. They shrank back in fear, all except the hunter, as he unsheathed his sword once more. "We meet again, evil Demon King." The Demon King did not reply but leapt forward in attack. He charged at the hunter, who stood ready. Their swords clashed with a loud ring. The hunter moved quickly, blocking each attack from the Demon King. He was strong, but the hunter was fast and smart. They moved back and forth, their swords striking together, sending sparks into the air. Then the hunter saw his chance. He moved to one side and then quickly struck. The Demon King was hit, and he fell. The long fight was over at last, and with a final swing of the sword, the hunter took off the head of the Demon King, and it rolled away into the corner of the room. Rather than quelling the sense of unease, they felt the danger renewed. As the castle began to groan and the stones around them began to fall, they knew they must leave, and leave quickly. They raced for their life back to the stone staircase, made their way to the summit of the wall in the whipping wind, and tumbled down the wall. They didn't feel safe until they got back over all of the debris, a safe distance away from the castle as it crumbled. They took a rest to catch their breath, and perhaps to soothe their nerves a little. The frog, jumpy as ever, was especially frightened and didn't calm himself for quite some time. The hunter stood tall among his companions, a weary yet triumphant look in his eyes. "So it is done," he declared, his voice carrying the weight of their long journey. "I have faced the Demon King and finally defeated him. I could not have done it without your help." Around him the group exchanged tired but proud smiles. The fox's eyes twinkled with a mix of mischief and satisfaction. The owl nodded with wise approval, and the frog let out a relieved croak, his tension easing. As the evening sky turned to a canvas of stars, they gathered around a crackling fire. The comforting aroma of roasted rabbit and chestnuts filled the air. Suddenly a voice pierced the night. "Please listen, I come in peace." Startled, they turned as one. The warrior instinctively drew his sword, his body tensed, ready for any threat. "Who goes there?" he called into the darkness, his voice echoing through the trees. A figure emerged from the shadows, hands raised in a gesture of peace. "I need to explain," he implored, his eyes seeking understanding. It was then the warrior recognized him. The Demon King's son. "I know that you know me," he continued, his voice tinged with urgency. "But when you defeated my father, you freed me from his spell. I'm not like him." The revelation hung in the air, heavy with skepticism. The group exchanged wary glances. The Demon King's son stood before them, a changed man, his appearance no longer menacing but rather marked by a plea for trust. His eyes, once cold and distant, now reflected a sincere plea for understanding. The man, full of doubt, said, "Prove it." The air was thick with tension as the Demon King's son faced the wary group. He reached slowly into the folds of his cloak, his movements deliberate and cautious. "If words are not enough," he began, his voice steady, "perhaps this will speak for me." With that he withdrew his hand, revealing a small amulet. It glowed softly, pulsating with an ancient magic. "I surrender this to you," he said, extending his hand towards them. "It was my father's, a source of his dark evil. With his defeat it is now mine, but I want no part of it." He placed the amulet gently on the ground before them, stepping back to show his peaceful intent. "This is my pledge," he continued, "a token of my desire to walk a different path, one that seeks to mend what has been broken and protect what remains." After a journey laden with trials, they finally returned to the oak house. The door creaked open, and sighs of relief filled the air as they settled around the table, each cradling a steaming cup of tea. The warmth of the brew soothed their spirits, a simple pleasure marking the end of their arduous adventure. The frog, the fox, the owl, the goat, the Demon King's son, and the hunter finally let the tension and the fear of the last few days melt away. The frog said, "Thank goodness we finally defeated the Demon King, and his evil is no more in this forest." The Demon King's son looked up in surprise and said, "Do you really think so?"